Hello, everybody, and welcome to another way back episode. I think that's what I want to call these things. Well, commentary. I don't know what to call these, but for now, way back episodes. Looking back at our old Ringside Heat episodes, and today we're going to be looking at episode 2. Jose Taboada. You can find me on social media at Taboada93. Mr. John Dawson, who you can find at John Dawson Music. And John, that was a very fun first episode. Looking back at episode 1 and hearing how we sounded like, what the landscape of WWE was, and AEW. So now we're looking at episode 2. Ooh yeah, dig it. That's the name of this
dig
episode.
it. Yeah,
So here's a description. Azeem Haq, musician and audio producer, joins the show to talk about growing up as a wrestling fan and his new single, Like the Rock. And the Ring Crew, which is us, gets together to talk about AEW Blood and Guts and the AEW biography of Macho Man Randy Savage. So we're back into A&E. Sorry, A&E biography, not AEW biography. A&E.
Oh yeah, I kind of remember this one. Yeah,
okay. So and I think I'm just remembering now that Lex really we were honed in on the interviews, which was awesome, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, he came out swinging. If I remember, initially that was kind of his thing, as he was trying to find that first segment. It was a monologue, a guest, and then us.
Yeah,
and then we just became far too interesting.
Well, I think there's just been so much to talk about, and I think we see that early on. But there was just like the topics of conversation became deeper and deeper to the point where we're saying, okay, like we need full segments of us, and then that just ended up being the norm, the regular.
Well, the other thing you'll see as we go along, and it was only episode 2, but the other thing you'll see as we go along is we develop a vibe, which is fun to watch between us, and I think that's what's neat. I'm really looking forward to when we get to our first really, what I think, Jimmy Corderas notwithstanding, but one of the interviews that I think,
I believe it's Vince Russo.
The Vince Russo interview is I haven't listened to that since I did it, since it aired.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I don't remember much of it. I remember a couple things. I remember what I asked. I remember the overall conversation. It was fine. Vince is. He certainly never cut me off after that interview. I think it went well.
So again, this was in May, and at the time, our episodes used to air on Saturdays.
Or it was like 9 or something, wasn't it? Saturday at 9, or was it
something like that? So if our first episode was May 1st, then this was May 8th, 2021.
2021.
May 8th, 2021. So all right, let's get right into it. Let's dive into episode 2. Here we go. No. Okay, it's just loading. I think it's just buffering.
In the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of Sauga 960 AM or its management.
It's the weekend, and you know what that means. Ringside Heat is on the air right here on News Talk Sauga 960 AM. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lex Tan, and if you'd like to reach me, hit me up at Lex Tan Media on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. And you can reach the show on social media at Ringside_Heat and on Facebook.com/Ringside Heat. On today's show, we'll chat with award-winning audio producer and musician Azeem Haq, who's just released his new single about the jabroni beating, pie-eating, trailblazing, eyebrow-raising, people's champ, The Rock. And in our roundtable, the Ring Crew throws down all the biggest headlines in a week chock full of big headlines. And we have an exciting announcement coming right up when we return. Ringside Heat on News Talk Sauga 960 AM.
I apologize for mispronouncing.
Stream us live.
I apologize for mispronouncing his name, Haq. Right?
Yeah, I believe so.
I apologize for that. Yeah.
At sauga960am.ca.
Welcome back to Ringside Heat on News Talk Sauga 960 AM. I'm your host, Lex Tan. First off, as I mentioned before the break, like your buddy and pal from a certain company's news slam, I got some big news about an exciting announcement from us here at Ringside Heat. We want you to engage, interact, and communicate with us here on the show, and we want to start that conversation. Therefore, if you give us a follow on our socials at Ringside_Heat and keep a lookout for our Ring Crew run-ins where we'll be posting extra content to spark and continue the conversations we have here on the show. As some guy from TV named Sid, who hails from Mississauga, once said, do our work for us. Again, follow us on our socials at Ringside_Heat and keep a lookout for our Ring Crew run-ins. But for now, let me tell you something.
And I forgot about the ring.
something, brother.
It was a
Oh Lord.
What were the ring crew run-ins? What was it?
It was basically what I was hoping to do now with the bonus content, just upload footage and just talk. And we haven't had the chance to do that, or we forgot about it. And I feel like we're gonna hear those a lot. I remember the run-ins now, and now I'm sad, and now I'm very sad.
Well, now we have.
All right, here we go. Let's keep it going.
tumultuous week in the world of wrestling and a tumultuous month that usually sees a little bit of a lull post WrestleMania. We've actually got 2 pay-per-views next weekend with Impact Under Siege and WrestleMania Backlash. We had Jordan Grace signing a multi-year deal with Impact Wrestling. We got a guy who's quote-unquote not Big Cass sending a message, while Kenny Omega and his AEW crew continue to stand tall in the world of crossovers. And speaking of crossovers, WWE and MLW discussing crossover opportunities, while Alicia Atout announces the open draft on a true season finale in a 365-day-a-year business model. We got to find out about the missing treasures of a current mayor. We were reminded of a guy named Mark Moonlit as the Phantom of the Wrestling Ring, at least thanks to the guy who would later be known as the world's biggest love machine, God rest his soul. And we also got to see the night and day difference of how the women's division in WWE is shaping up. From the main roster, Charlotte and Asuka being handled so well, they're progressing stories and doing a lot of interesting TV, smelling that something's cooking with Sonya Deville, and wondering on the other end of the scale, what's really the direction with the women's tag titles. You know what, maybe they should take a page out of what is happening in NXT with how Shotzi and Ember have been doing with the titles and main eventing NXT, also having a little bit of an overrun, which is pretty welcome actually, that saw an epic main event with new tag champs being crowned with Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell. But I want to weigh in and give my 2 cents as well on AEW Blood and Guts. While it was a welcome sight, it's a bit of a throwback to the old Attitude Era days and teed up with an epic promo clinic from the previous week's AEW Dynamite. I've been reading some responses from members of the internet wrestling community about the way they handled the ending of that match, particularly Jericho's fall off the Blood and Guts cage. Now, some people, if you're listening to this show, most likely it's not you saying this, but some have been complaining that Jericho landed on a crash pad instead of taking a full bump. And thinking about this, that's just insane. The man is almost 50 years old. He's had 30 years of wrestling in this business. He put his blood and his guts to help Tony Khan, Cody Rhodes, et al. Put this new company in a position to succeed. And in no less than 3 years, they're seeing success and ratings that TNA only dreamed of having, despite of having some of the biggest established stars in the industry. Not everyone in this business is a Mick Foley who got pushed off Hell in a Cell onto the announce table, then lather, rinse, repeat in blood and with a tooth protruding from his face as he was chokeslammed through the roof of the cell. Not everyone is a Shane O'Mac who will fall off a cage or jump off a turnbuckle onto the announce table in order to get a hug from his dad. But, you know, even he at Backlash 20 years ago landed himself on a crash pad when he went to drive his elbow onto the Big Show. And you see what he did before that? He still needed to make the sign of a cross before jumping off that Backlash set. Even the daredevil Jeff Hardy, who's gone through tables, swantoned opponents through ladders, still needed a crash pad when he swantoned Randy Orton from what was the equivalent of the bottom border of the Raw Titantron screen all the way to virtually the arena floor. Chris Jericho doesn't need to risk himself for that bump, but he did it anyway. And you know why? He did that for the story. He did that for the show. He did that for MJF. He did that for the Chris Jericho character, whatever plans may be going forward. But just as importantly, Chris Jericho did that for me. He did that for you. He did that for the fans. Much respect to one of the greatest ever and for a fellow Canadian, Chris Jericho.
Drink it in, man.
We've got a great show for you today. Award-winning musician and producer Azeem Haq is here, and he'll talk about his newest track written about a certain wrestler turned actor, and the Ring Crew will break down the big headlines this week when Ringside Heat returns on News Talk Sauga 960 AM.
No radio, no.
Look at that, huh? Complaining about crash pads. People getting angry about crash pads.
Yeah.
It's and I feel like there are still people today that still like get mad that people are not willing to like quote unquote I mean, they are taking risks, but they get mad that it's not a bigger risk just because they want to see entertainment.
Yeah, and that kind of, I mean, we're on the other side of the Jack Perry CM Punk thing, and
right,
like there's yeah, like, what do you want? You want real
right.
lass? You want real lass? Like, why?
Yeah, and you know, again, like the whole topic about real glass or whatever happened in backstage will forever be talked in infamy. But wow, I mean, and I remember that spot. That was a big spot. But yeah, I mean, it's.
I remember that too. Now that you mention it, like I haven't thought about it since it
Right.
happened, but I
Yeah.
do remember that.
But again, it's just a reminder that like they're still willing to take those bumps. I mean, I'm pretty sure that a crash pad isn't still pain free.
No, and I wonder if it, like, okay, I'm gonna go to WrestleMania 40 right now because obviously
It's fresh off our minds.
it's fresh off our minds, and I was on the side of the ramp where Jay speared Jimmy.
Oh, right.
They came down and like I had a direct sight line to the crash pad.
I remember your view, yeah, your vantage point.
So the thing I'm coughing.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good.
The thing that I thought is like, okay, they have a crash pad, but the camera angle, when I watched it back, you would never know that.
No.
So I don't think the argument is for the crash pad. It's how the bump gets framed. Right?
Fair.
And if I remember correctly with that Jericho thing, it was really more about, maybe they just could have framed that better, filmed
Probably,
it better,
yeah.
whatever, you know, which is an ongoing, and you'll hear as we go along, one of the ongoing indictments of AEW, you know, among other things, is their camera work. Anyways,
all right, we carry on. Here we go. Let's come back from the oh man, I gotta come back from the break.
Stream us live on sauga960am.ca.
Pentatonics,
Back to Ringside Heat on News Talk Sauga 960. I'm your host, Lex Tan, and as always, you can reach me and follow me on all social media platforms at Lex Tan Media. And I know you want to get in touch and communicate with the show, and you could do so on Twitter, on Instagram, on Snapchat, and TikTok at Ringside_Heat or Facebook.com/Ringside Heat. Our guest tonight is an award-winning audio producer and songwriter, best known for the anthems he created for your Toronto Raptors and Toronto Maple Leafs. He was born and raised in Toronto, the youngest child of Pakistani parents, started making music at the age of 13, writing songs and learning how to produce, and has had several tracks on the radio as well. And his Go Leafs Go track actually went viral just before the 2017 Stanley Cup playoffs began and has garnered media attention from City TV, from TSN, and yes, internationally on CBS Sports. And his latest single, Like the Rock, is available on his YouTube, on iTunes, and Spotify, and all over social media. Please welcome to Ringside Heat, Mr. Azeem Haq. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, thanks, Lex. Thank you for that intro, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm just so glad to be able to talk to you, and I listened to your track and everything, and I think it's such a banger. And
appreciate it, man.
And I'm excited to talk to you because I know that you're here because you're a big wrestling fan yourself. So you know this is great.
Oh, dude, I've been a huge wrestling fan. Yeah, man, ever since I was a kid, for sure. So thank you for having me on this show, man. I'm so excited to be on, and congratulations, by the way, to have this new show. I'll be tuned in.
Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you so much. So let's talk about some of your biggest wrestling memories over here. I know that we've had years and years of wrestling memories that we could talk about, but let's talk about your biggest wrestling memories. What are the things that kind of formed you as a wrestling fan?
Oh man, well, wrestling, I was into it when I was a little kid. Like my dad and I used to wrestle around all the time, and I wasn't watching it back then when I was like 3 years old, obviously, but I was the mannerisms and playing with my dad, and him and I would pretend like we were King Kong Bundy and Hulk Hogan wrestling each other type of thing. So even though I wasn't actively watching at that age, it was something that appealed to me from a really early age. But I started watching when I was around 9 or 10. I can't really figure out what match it was that got me into it. There's a couple of matches, and one that stuck out to me early on was it wasn't even WWF at the time. It was I think it was WCW or NWA. It was Ric Flair versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Oh, right,
And
yeah.
I had just randomly put the TV on, and it was that match. I think it was Clash of Champions or Great American Bash, one of those pay-per-views or on TV, and man, I couldn't help fall in love with it. Like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat had this amazing character, and Flair was the perfect heel, and I understood right away what the storyline was all about and everything, and it grabbed my attention quite fast. So when I was a kid, I discovered WWF Superstars on Saturday morning. So, I watched my cartoons when I was a kid, and then when noon came, it was time for WWF Superstars. This is before Monday Night Raw. So that was the only thing on TV that we could really watch in Canada in particular for wrestling. So that's really what got me into it. And I was a big fan of Lex Luger back then for some reason, the narcissist, and he had a huge, great body, and it was, yeah, man, it captivated me right away.
You got good taste in names, that's for damn sure.
Lex, for sure, bro. No
Exactly.
doubt.
So how has your wrestling fandom shaped your experience and shaped your life on the whole?
That's a great question, man. I think you'll find with wrestling fans in particular, we all kind of root for the underdog type of thing, and we all, look to wrestling for motivation and inspiration. A lot of people don't really realize that or understand that if you're not a wrestling fan. The storylines can it's like a soap opera essentially, right? So I think a lot of us emotional beings out there, a lot of empathetic people, we kind of look to wrestling for that fulfillment. So yeah, man, it's helped me quite a bit. I've had numerous surgeries when I was younger. I was born with a spinal condition. So in the hospital, looking at these types of wrestlers and seeing how they keep trained and motivated and all that kind of stuff. And there's certain wrestlers in particular, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, like The Rock and those type of wrestlers. They're very they can motivate you, man. So and I was always a big fan of those types of wrestlers, along with other dudes, really cool dudes like Stone Cold and The Undertaker and so on. So yeah, no, man, it's very motivating for sure.
Ringside Heat on News Talk Sauga 960. We're talking with Azeem Haq. And Azeem, let's talk about Toronto being, the city that we both live in, and how big wrestling is in this city of ours. And you got some stories about your best experience of wrestling in Toronto, but that was not necessarily during a WWE or an actual wrestling show.
So early on, I don't know if you remember, Lex, you might be a little too young. I'm not going to date ourselves, but back in the day, before the ACC was around or shows were popping off at the Sky Dome, we had WrestleMania 6, of course, at the Sky Dome. I wasn't there for that. I was a little too young, but there was a few house shows at the CNE here in Toronto, and
oh, wow,
those were massive. I'm talking, thousands and thousands of people, and they would do the meet and greets. So, Undertaker at the time and throughout his career, he didn't really do meet and greets, but at the time, he was a heel and he was the champ at the time that I went to this meet and greet, and it was outside, and we're in this long lineup, and I didn't want to meet the Undertaker. I was scared. You know what I mean? I was a kid, and if you remember Taker back then, he was dreadful and he was scary and had this persona or whatever. So I lined up to go see Mr. Perfect. God bless his soul, Kurt Hennig. So I was in the lineup for him, and I got up to meet him, and sitting beside Mr. Perfect was the Undertaker. And I was just so nervous, and I was almost on the verge of crapping my pants type of thing. And I went up to Mr. Perfect, and I blundered out something like, Mr. Perfect, you truly are perfect. Something nervous came out of me, and I just said that. And you could see Mr. Perfect kind of react like, oh, come on, kid. And he looked at the Undertaker, and Undertaker just kind of rolled his eyes like, oh, man, you get all these kids praising you and stuff or whatever, right? So I just remember that little reaction as a kid, and it was a little awkward, but it was still cool to see these larger-than-life figures. You see them on TV, but in person, they're something else. They're giants, especially to a kid, right?
That's something. Undertaker and Kurt Hennig together
At a signing, yeah.
that is one of the most random pairings I think I would have ever thought of for a signing, especially the Undertaker.
Well, it doesn't sound like it was like we had Undertaker at WrestleMania World where it was like $200 to just get in line. You know what I mean? Like this is definitely an early Taker where he was a little bit more accessible.
I think a little bit more accessible is an understatement with what the prices must have been worth. Although he was champion, right?
Yeah,
because he had that small stint in the 90s, I think. Huh. I
where,
forgot.
I don't know where I don't know where Kurt would have like Mr. This would have been Mr. Perfect's. Was this his like still like his main run? Like
I was gonna say, like, if he brought up WrestleMania 6 and he was too young to go, and WrestleMania 6 was in 1990, so then I presume 90, like late fall, like fall winter 1990 into winter of 91 or summer of 91.
yeah, it would have had to have been because it would have had to have been. Yeah,
Something along those lines. I just thought that listening to that, I just think that's intriguing.
Yeah,
like,
that is
Mr.
interesting.
Perfect and the Undertaker.
Just sitting at a table together. Yeah.
What a combo.
Speaking of interacting with wrestlers, I believe you've got a story about a time that you interacted with one of our own, Toronto's own, Rated R Superstar Edge. But we'll get into that when we come back on Ringside Heat on Sauga 960 AM. I'm Lex Tan. I'm here with Azeem Haq. Come back soon.
Stream us live at sauga960am.ca.
And welcome back to Ringside Heat on News Talk Sauga 960 AM. I'm Lex Tan, and our guest today is Toronto musician, award-winning musician, and audio producer Azeem Haq. And earlier we were talking about a little bit of your wrestling experience, or a little bit of your experience with meeting other wrestlers, and particularly you were able to interact with Toronto's Adam Edge Copeland. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so later on in my life, I was no longer a kid anymore, but right out of college, well, excuse me, no, not right out of college. I was still in college for radio broadcasting, which is how I met you, Lex. We're both in the radio industry. That's how we got our start. And
exactly.
So back then, Edge was the WWE champ. So I had an internship at a radio station. It was my first internship. I'm still in college, and it's for the morning show. So, I was doing my internship, and you do the regular things. You go coffee runs, you answer emails, things like that. But then they also knew that I was a wrestling fan. So that morning I came in for my internship, and the hosts came to me and said, hey, we have a special guest coming in today. It's Edge. So, inside I'm kind of freaking out a little bit. We meet a lot of celebrities on a daily basis. So we have to keep professional and all that kind of stuff. And usually I am, but this is Edge coming into the station. Right. So I was a little excited, of course. And then he tells me, the morning show host, he tells me, hey, we want you to produce an intro for him to air on the radio, because they knew that I had some production skills and they knew I was a wrestling fan. So, the other co-host gave me a big stack of VHS cassettes of Monday Night Raw. And he said, go in the studio. You have an hour. You have an hour to whip this intro together. And I'm panicking at this point, right? Because this is Edge, right? This is an internship. Obviously, I want to impress my employer and my bosses and everything. So I hopped in that studio. I did what I did. I put it all together with his theme music and different clips, JR in the background talking about Edge and whatever. So I put together this 30-second to 45-second intro for him. and I played it for the hosts and our morning show producer at the time, and they approved it. They put the stamp of approval on it. I think the morning show producer added his own little touch to it as well, but mostly it was my production. So the time comes around where Edge walks in, this huge figure again, with his WWE title on his shoulder. I think it was the spinner belt at the time as well. He puts it on the desk, and I'm quiet because I'm an intern, right? I want to know my role, so to speak, and just kind of stay in the corner or whatever. And so I'm watching them kind of introduce each other, and I shook his hand, and then it's time for the intro. So they all put their headphones on, and Edge puts his headphones on, and we're all listening. And the intro comes on, and 10 seconds through it, I see Edge's face, and his eyes are lit up, and he's like, in this amazement type of reaction. And the intro ends, and the first thing he says is, "Amazing intro. Whoever produced that knows what they're doing." I come from the WWE, where production, as is top notch, and that is right up there. So in that moment, right, my production skills have been validated by the man himself, right? And it was just incredible, not just from a employer perspective, but one of my idols, Edge, is telling me that I did a good job, So for me, that sparked intense motivation to continue into the radio industry. I know Edge, he also he was a student of radio as well. He went to Radio Broadcast College as well. So he knew from so many different perspectives, and it was the genuine reaction where he didn't really need to say that, especially on the radio, right? And so ever since that day, it really sparked fuel under me, and I took that rocket, and I went to other levels. As we met in radio, and I've had a lot of production experience ever since. And fast forward 15 years later, yeah, man, it meant a lot to me that day that he inspired me so much.
Well, let's fast forward. That's a lovely story, but let's fast forward 2 and change years later, and anybody listening to this right now should go look at the Adam Copeland interview on Ringside Heat.
I feel like, if you had to, this may be a bit extreme, but if you had to think of like a patron saint for Ringside Heat, it's starting to sound like it's Copeland, it's Edge.
It's funny, it keeps coming back, eh? Like, it really does.
It keeps coming back, and I know I brought him up a lot in the last 133 episodes, and obviously, you and Lex had the fortune and had the luck to interview him as well. And it's funny because, like, I remember, like, behind the scenes, there was like so much talk about, like, for the rest of the gang to meet him, or who's gonna do it. And and it's funny because I was telling everybody, like, let's remember to keep it cool, just like what Azeem is saying. I'm like, let's keep it cool, guys. I know it's Edge, I know it's Copeland, I know you're all excited, and this is a big opportunity, but remember, let's keep it cool. I had the same mindset. And again, I'm happy that you and Lex had the opportunity, but I remember I had to tell everybody, even myself, I'm like, we got to hone it down.
Let me tell you, like, he's talking about his experience with Edge. I had quite an experience with him, and I'll tell you, when I knew, just as a quick story, as we were waiting because we had the time, whatever it was, 6:00, I think, and I was sitting there at like 5:35, with all my gear, and I'm just like, I'm just gonna sit here for 25 minutes. And I've played a lot of things, I've done a lot of things, but there was I couldn't see past that moment because I had no idea what was gonna happen. You know what I mean? And Lex, we all did kind of a bunch of back and forth, and I was thinking in my mind, like, how do I want to approach this with him? And I listen back to it, and I think of things I could have done better, for sure.
Of course, yeah, that'll always happen.
Which will always happen. But it was amazing. After many, many, many discussions, I probably pared it down to about that many key points that I hit and wanted to hit with him, and I hit them all. But it was amazing, when you're sitting with a guy like that, The great thing about a guy like Adam Copeland, and again, I don't want to go too far because I know we're listening to the episode. The great thing about a guy like Adam Copeland, I think he's probably the exception, not the rule, is that he really did just kind of lean into the chat. You know,
Yeah.
he just leaned into the conversation, and he didn't have to do that.
No.
You know, he really could have made us work and really made it tough on us. And I wasn't sure when he came in because he didn't look too happy. He looked a little grumpy. I'm not gonna lie, he did. I was a little worried. I'm like, oh man, did we just wake him up, or does he's trying to get to the gym and he's just we're taking time from like I don't know.
Or did he already go through a full day of interviews and
Yeah,
then be
is
one
he
of the
been doing
last
this all
ones?
day? Like, where are we at?
Yeah.
Like, you just don't know. I'm just like, oh my god, he doesn't look very happy. But yeah, 2 seconds in the interview. So, anyways, it was just neat, hearing these encounters. Like, we had 25 minutes, and he was very generous with us with his time. We had 25 minutes with this guy that I didn't think I'd ever get 2 seconds with, who comes up again and again and again. As you said, the patron saint of Ringside Heat. Very likely it would be between Adam Copeland and Jimmy Corderas. I think would be
One or the other,
the two.
yeah.
It'd be the two. Anyways,
Which of course, again, like you can always catch John and Lex's interview with Adam Copeland here on Ringside Heat on YouTube. It is up on YouTube, and definitely worth a listen. Let's get back to episode 2. Once I know how to hit play, there we go.
To take that and skyrocket with that kind of momentum. Of course, one of those guys is The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, who's taken his WWE career and turned it into something that has probably been more than anybody could have ever expected out of any wrestler, I guess to say. And particularly, I'd like to talk about The Rock because obviously you've got your song, which is about The Rock himself. But before we talk about your song, I want to ask you, anything could happen in the WWE, but if The Rock does make his way back in to do a program with his cousins, Roman Reigns and Jimmy and Jey Uso, what do you think that the WWE could do as a kind of like a fantasy booking situation in your mind?
Oh man, sky is the limit. I don't know if you were there. I think you were for WrestleMania 18. Were you in the building?
Unfortunately, no. But I did watch it with a whole bunch of my friends, like maybe about 50 of my friends inside one small house. So yeah,
Lex, that was, I'm sure on TV you could understand the environment of what was happening. But when I was there in WrestleMania 18, and I remember sitting there and the entire, not just the match, but before the event even started, there was this electricity in the air, and you could understand that everybody was there for The Rock versus Hogan. You understand?
Mhm.
And it was just this very special feeling. So if The Rock were to come back once again, and face Roman, sky's the limit. I hope to see not just one thing. Obviously, it needs to be a WrestleMania match. There's no doubt about that. I would love to see him take the title back and have a bit of a run. I don't know if that's realistic with his Hollywood schedule and all that kind of stuff, but even if it was for that one night, you know what I mean, and he has to give it back on Monday Night Raw or lose it or whatever the case may be, I would love to see him actually become the champ once again.
Yeah, this will come up again and again and again. This Rock Roman, but there's the first
That's
time.
the first instance. I didn't realize that it
first-
was.
that's the
I
first
forgot that
time.
it was referenced that early.
Yeah,
And this is the funny thing. It's that it nearly happened, and we all rioted.
yeah. Well,
It was gonna happen.
yeah, but none of us knew Cody was coming at this point, right?
No. Cody's still
Cody's
in
yet to
WWE.
come. So right now, and I don't think we even had Sammy and KO at this point in the bloodline. So
Sammy was close to it. Yeah, Sammy. No,
like he might have been kind of getting in there, but
no. Sammy came in 2022.
yeah,
Because
so
WrestleMania 39 was 2023. Wow.
yeah, so
Look
the
at
blood,
that.
it's so yeah, but we knew right away the minute. That's that's the crazy thing about this bloodline story is from the beginning. Well, it's got to be Dewey. It's got to be Dwayne, right? It's got to be
That is
Dwayne. Got to be Dwayne.
unreal. And I mean, like again, like obviously
And it was handed to us.
we got it. Well, in a sense,
And
but
well, maybe it's still coming. I don't know, but it's like
well, not for the title anymore.
no,
It's
but
over. The ship sailed.
that's the beauty of where this story goes, which again, and I said this at the beginning when we started episode 1, the bloodline story is this wonderful subtext through all of the Ringside Heat episodes. We're tracking the evolution, pardon the pun, of bloodline. And right now we're just at Roman's got this, obviously this he's the crown prince and all that, and we just want to see Rock come in, and that's great. And that's the first time it's mentioned. It won't be the last.
It's just
Azeem, attaboy, Azeem. That's good.
All right, let's keep
Yeah.
it going. Keep it going.
Who would you consider to be on your Mount Rushmore of professional wrestlers?
Wow, that's a loaded question, bro. So for me, Stone Cold has to be up there. Hulk Hogan has to be up there as well for what he did for this business. I don't think it would be this commercial. I don't think they would have this type of success if it wasn't for those two, Hulk Hogan and Steve Austin. First, obviously, Hulkster made that happen. I have a really cool story about Hulk Hogan too. We can talk about it after if you want to do it as a bonus clip or whatever. But
yeah, sure, that'd be great.
So those two, Bret Hart being a Canadian hero for sure, he has to be on Mount Rushmore. And the last one, I'm gonna have to give it to Taker because he's the one constant, right? And he's been here for that many decades, and it's a beautiful thing to see. So yeah, Undertaker, Bret, Stone Cold, and Hulkster would be my four. And then there's obviously very, very close honorable mentions like Shawn Michaels, and there's a few that I would make honorable mentions, but yeah, definitely those four. It's really hard to say because The Rock is so close too, right? Like I'm so inspired by The Rock, but him and Stone Cold, they're very close in terms of that popularity. So yeah, man, he would definitely be a high up honorable mention, if not on that Mount Rushmore as well.
And so let's talk about your song, Like the Rock. And as you mentioned as well, that he is one of those high honorable mentions in terms of one of the greatest to ever lace boots and step into the ring. Let's talk about the song. How did you come up with it? How were you inspired by it? And what is it that brought you to this writing of the song?
Well, so I've been watching The Rock ever since he was Rocky Maivia back in the day. And I think more recently, what motivated me to make the song was I was watching his show, Young Rock. Great show. And it shows his story. And I think any wrestling fan, not even any wrestling fan, you'll enjoy that show to see where he's come from. And it's just so motivating to see that, somebody like him is an underdog. He doesn't look like an underdog by any means, right? He's this big muscular dude and he's got great looks and all that stuff, but he, like a lot of people, struggled, right? He almost didn't become a success. He wanted to be a football player, right? And that dream for him didn't come true. And with $7 in his pocket, as he likes to say, he went out and built his new career. He changed his dream a little bit, but it was all meant to be, right? Some things don't happen for a certain reason, and his story is the epitome of that. So to see him, a lot of people could be defeated. Your dreams don't come true, and you kind of give up on that, but you still remain focused in terms of attaining a different goal. So for him to go out and become a WWE superstar and now become a Hollywood blockbuster superstar, right? There's nobody bigger than The Rock at the moment. It's just the ultimate motivating story. So one day I was in the studio and I heard this beat that I was producing, and I just kept getting Rocky Johnson, Rocky Maivia, The Rock vibes from it. You know what I mean? So, and the whole clanging and banging type of vibe. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to make an anthem for this guy. You know what I mean? Whether it gets out there or not, I make music just to make me feel good and to motivate myself as well. So I put that together. I put a little video together as well, where I'm deep faking myself with The Rock.
Yes.
I'm not the biggest dude in the world, but to live vicariously through that video and that song, I think for anybody, right, it motivates you, whether you're a bodybuilder, wrestler, or even audio producer in radio, right? It just motivates you to see what he can do and what we all can do.
And I've heard it. It's a great track. It's available on YouTube. It's available on Spotify and iTunes. And you can use it on social media, either on Instagram or TikTok and all of that stuff. It's a great track to listen to. And it's a really motivating track because, who doesn't love Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and who doesn't need motivation, especially in the times we're living in right now. And the man, The Rock, is a great person to be able to get that inspiration from, and person that is very inspiring as well, especially with the music and the journey that he's been on. Mr. Azeem Haq, thank you for joining us here in Ringside Heat, my friend.
Thank you so much, Lex. I appreciate it, and keep doing an amazing job with this show. It is just too sweet, brother.
And when we come back, Ringside Heat, we'll have the roundtable. We bring in the ring crew. We'll be talking about the Macho Man Randy Savage biography, as well as AEW Blood and Guts.
Ooh, yeah.
Good interview.
Yeah.
Really good interview.
Yeah, that was good.
Okay, let's hear the last 20 minutes. Good man, I missed that.
And welcome back to Ringside Heat here on News Talk Sauga 960 AM.
Good rock
I'm
and
your
roll.
host, Lex Tan, and I know you want to get in touch with the show and interact with all of us here. And so if you want to do that, just go log on to your Twitter or your Instagram, your TikTok, your Snapchat, and look us up at ringside_heat, and you'll be able to get in touch with us there. Here we have the ring crew ready for our roundtable segments, and we're going to start off with introducing our man Colin, our graphic designer. How you doing, my friend?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
I am excited over here to talk about a whole bunch of great wrestling. And Mark, give us your Twitch handle again.
All right, it's MKD_CEO4, but you could just call me MKD.
There you go. That's Mark. We also got our musician and our theme song composer, good old John. How you doing, my friend?
Doing good. Good to be with you. Good to be with you. That also, by the way, I do want to mention Steve Peconi, who wrote that theme song with me, a friend of ours and a very talented guy. So
yes, thank you very much, Steve. And also our local wrestling memorabilia collector, good old at Coco Collects, Chico. How you doing?
Pumped to talk about some gore.
Thanks, awesome. Chico. And speaking of gore, and we got a little bit of that, almost akin to the old Attitude Era with AEW Blood and Guts, and how that all worked out. So
why did I think I had a perfect attendance up until like episode 10?
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess I'm not on this.
But I suspect you're probably on like the next 8.
Well, then this episode sucked. I'm kidding. Let's keep it going.
We've heard some good things about it. We got some bad things about it as well. Who would like to start off with the conversation here?
Well, I'm gonna say that I did like a lot of things about it. Perhaps the end is going to be something we'll talk about, and that's controversial. What I liked about the beginning, since we're starting, I'll talk about the beginning. I liked what MJF did during their entrance. I don't know if anybody noticed this, but I'm going to flash back a little bit. Samoa Joe, when he was defending the NXT title one time in one of the takeovers, walked down with a bunch of security guards. And one of them was the person who would eventually become Maxwell Jacob Friedman MJF. And Samoa Joe very nonchalantly tossed aside and shoved aside this MJF security jabroni. But years later, MJF was entering with his entourage now, who is the Pinnacle. And on his way down, he shoved somebody on his right-hand side as well. And I think that was a bit of a symbolic FU to the industry for seeing him as just Samoa Joe's biatch until that moment. So I think it was well placed.
Wow. Deep
Colin, what do you got?
Well, for me, I liked all of it really, but it was really nice to be excited about a TV episode of wrestling this week. To me, the advertising and everything, it was a pay-per-view feel. Like Blood and Guts was exciting. The whole card looked good. The main event, of course. And it was still a TV episode for sure. It wasn't a pay-per-view by any stretch, but the advertising, the feel of it was great. So it was just really nice to be excited about an episode of TV for this week.
Mark, you got something?
I gotta say, you know what? Hate him or love him, I don't like MJF as his attitude, whatever, but he can perform downright. Like this guy can do it all. The lead up to the Blood and Guts match, terrific, just terrific from the week before when they were going through their promo, when all 10 guys were on the ring plus Tully Blanchard. It's something that I wanted to see on TV. Well, you know what? NXT War Games could probably learn a thing or two when it comes to blood and guts. Because they did the traditional 4-on-4, I think, when they did NXT TakeOver War Games. Mm-hmm. They could do the format like that. But you know what? AEW kind of stepped it up because they got either side. They're it wasn't like a pod. They were going through some game plans or whatever. And everyone's okay, I'm eyeing this person. I'm eyeing that person out there. They did meet in the middle, all of that. To me, it was well performed, well thought out, well trained out. But it was very highly entertaining for me to watch it too. I was so prepped up, everything.
Yeah, I like kind of picking up something Mark said. I thought what I loved when all five of them got in and they came together, it was right at an end game. Watching the two come at each other, I thought it was really nicely done. And I
hold on.
Yeah, I think it was just coming off the top rope. It just looked like that moment. That
praising AEW.
I was just gonna say let's mark this. I think I just complimented AEW.
And I find it a little bit funny that you said, it's like an end game. I'm like, if only you knew what was coming 3 years later.
No kidding. But I do remember that moment, and it was nicely staged. I do remember that moment. I was impressed with that. I will.
And folks, that will be the last time for the next. I don't know.
The end of that. Moving on.
Sometimes you gotta give respect and give dues to
sure
something.
Yeah, something like that.
I think that, and then I think that was your one free pass. Okay. Let's carry on.
It's all been coming up to. At the end of the day, it looked like I know there's been a lot of talk about the bump at the end and some of the production choices maybe were whatever, but this company is still finding its way. And for me, they could put on the crappiest show.
Oh, this is hilarious. I got to hear what else I have to say.
So, John, is the company still finding their way?
I certainly. Yeah, I guess they are. Listen, okay, let's just hear what else.
Keep it going.
Chew Chest to say. Let's hear what else this Chew Chest to say. Yeah.
All right.
In the world, which they didn't. But I'm just glad that they exist because they are legit.
Have not changed my
real
position.
Voice, and they are carving a path forward with incredible tenacity. And to see them there, I just couldn't wish them more success. I mean, you can pick apart things they've done, but this is good for wrestling as a whole. And I enjoyed the show. I like what Colin said about how to pay-per-view feel on a Wednesday night. I mean, that's brilliant. You're not getting that feel. And, when you have the kind of mess that Throwback SmackDown was with, we don't know what decade we're in, it just looked a little lazy. And then you had these guys who were literally spilling their blood, to make themselves known. I think that says something about what they're capable of. And I think WWE really should be paying attention to this.
Hey,
wow.
Let's take a minute on that because I was not wrong.
No, you were not. I don't think you were.
They tossed the gauntlet down. They just had no idea how well WWE would respond.
Yes.
Because now I have that in my head. The Throwback SmackDown,
and that was a brutal SmackDown.
Was a disaster.
It wasn't the best because I think we were all ready for they were teasing I think the fist stage. To be fair, I think most of the Throwback episodes aren't the best anyway. So,
but do you think that's even going to be on the radar right now?
No.
They're not even going to look at that.
No, and how do I know that? Because we didn't get as many nostalgia surprises at WrestleMania 40,
and we were there, and
we were there,
and we got the ones that mattered to the story,
right? But even throughout both nights, we were waiting for WrestleMania moments, WrestleMania surprises of legends, and there weren't a crazy amount of them.
the WrestleMania moments were delivered by the current talent.
Exactly.
But
Which is
there
what
was
Triple
no
H cares
way
about.
at that point, WWE was not there. So AEW, listen, and again, I know I don't want to harp on it because I know there's still some bit, but I'm not wrong. I said I wanted them to succeed. At that time, they were doing precisely what
they were firing on all cylinders.
they were
Yeah.
firing on all cylinders, and they're doing precisely what the other company should be doing, which was pushing WWE. Unfortunately, and this is now the second time in history we've seen it, when you push WWE, you're poking a sleeping bear, and that has to be done. But when they wake up,
Game over.
look out. Look
Sure.
out.
Sure. Did it take maybe a little longer than anticipated? Because I think
As we'll see as these episodes go on, we're looking at a 2-3 year run. It wasn't as quick a turnaround as the Attitude Era. That was a matter of months.
Right. So
You know what I mean?
interesting outlook.
Yeah, that's
interesting to see where you were in May 2021. All right.
Yeah, no kidding. All right.
And I'd like to also kind of like latch on to something that you just said, that it was a pay-per-view feel on a TV night and everything. And so maybe in a sort of sense that maybe some of the fans were expecting a different kind of an ending to the blood and guts match, maybe, or maybe more of a resolution than anything. And so there were a lot of mixed reviews about that as far as I've read on the internet. So what do you guys think about how it all turned out and like how everything happened in the end? Chico.
You know what? I did like it. The one thing I will say about the finish, which for those that didn't watch, spoiler alert, and now I'm going to say it, was Jericho getting thrown off by the ringleader of the Pinnacle after the victory off the top of the cage onto a crash pad. Now, that's standard practice. If you're going to do a stunt like that, you got to have a crash pad, because I don't want to see anybody get paralyzed or die on national television on a Wednesday night.
Mm-hmm.
So well done on that front. It was safe. My problem with that ending was the camera work. Again, like Johnny says, honestly, they've for them even to have a match of this quality on a Wednesday night, AEW is doing something right. But this was one of the little growing pains I think that that they will learn from, is the camera work when Jericho fell, because there are ways that you don't have to zoom in so close to Jericho, for example, after he's fallen or even during the fall, just because there's so much obvious sighting of foam pads and everything that just made it look a little weaker is my point.
Well, Chico, you're right. You're talking about the camera work. There was like one guy on the very end when I think it was when Santana Ortiz was being attacked on the side, and like there was one camera guy going like this and like that. I mean, it's hard for me to like pick it up there, but the one issue that I had was I was actually checking out the American feed for the Blood and Guts match, and they just kept cutting it. We're going to take it to commercial break. We'll be right back. We'll be on picture in picture. Okay, I'm just checking the time. It was like, what, 9:45? I'm like, okay, that's probably like the last commercial break they're going to go on to. But then like when they took off picture in picture, they went right to commercial, and then they brought it back up. And like, what did I just miss? Because like they're already on top of like Chris Jericho's or MJF's already on the top of the cage, and like, we'll take it to commercial break. We'll be right back. I'm like, come on, like at least I want to get some more info. Like I don't want to stop watching this. This was supposed to be like a pay-per-view type of matchup on the TV. So that was my issue of the night.
Well, one thing that I can also say that I personally liked about it was the idea that the inner circle all banded together for Jericho and kind of like pleaded with MJF. That was actually a kind of a twist that I didn't see coming. And I thought it was actually a good thing because, again, a pay-per-view feel, but on a TV night, it was meant to be, at least in my mind, it was meant to be something that extends the story, gets you more interested because a big pay-per-view is coming up in a couple of weeks. But what we're going to do right now, time's not our friend. We're going to take a short break. When we'll come back, we'll discuss what happened with the Macho Man biography, Ringside Heat on Sauga 960 AM. Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Stream us live at sauga960am.ca.
And we're back with more Ringside Heat here on News Talk Sauga 960 AM. I'm your host, Lex Tan. Of course, you can get in touch with the show on all our social media at ringside_heat. Joined here again by the Ringside Heat Ring Crew. We got Colin, we got Mark, we got John, and we got Chico. And we got to talk about this Macho Man biography. Apparently, a lot of reviews have been coming in, and there's been a little bit of a controversy with this. A lot of people have been saying it's been more of a, I guess, say a dig job or like a smear job, more so than, let's say, the Stone Cold or the Roddy Piper biographies. So, John, I believe you had something, wanted to start off this segment.
Ooh. Yeah, I was just thinking, I watched it and my first thoughts were that, there's some negativity that was being, portrayed there. But again, initially my thought was, well, wasn't anything we hadn't heard. It wasn't until the next day when I started hearing the words, hatchet job and all these things. But where it was coming from were people, wrestlers, people who know more about this, I think, than I do in terms of have worked closer to that fire. And when they were saying it, I thought, oh, maybe I missed something here, because my initial response wasn't quite that polarized. I wasn't really scandalized by it, and I was thinking maybe I should have been. And then as I thought about it over the course of the week, I was thinking, in comparison to the 2 weeks before, there was a lot more emphasis on some of the more unfortunate realities of his story. And to what extent it was intentional or malevolent, I think nobody can really know, save the people who did it. But it sat with me for a couple days, and as I think I rewatched it again, I thought, this isn't. It wasn't nice. But again, I wasn't totally shocked by some of the stuff I heard, because I had heard it before. But I was amazed at how polarizing it was, and I was following several people's reviews of it. So it was I can see why people had a problem with it. Bottom line, I really can.
Well, for me, a warts and all biography usually ends by leaning into redemption for the subject of the piece, but they seem to kind of gloss over like early career successes, title championships that he won. They, maybe there was a shot of him with a belt, but they didn't really go into maybe what led up to that. Of course, they talked about the Steamboat match, as they should. I mean, one of the greatest matches probably ever out of WrestleMania. But they really leaned more than I think they needed to into the dark parts, which is fine. But usually at the end of these kind of documentaries, I want to feel ultimately glad that they found their peace, like he did, by, marrying his high school sweetheart at the end and seemingly to come to peace with leaving wrestling and all that kind of stuff. But to me, it was more focused than needed on the dark parts.
Ringside Heat on Sauga 960 AM. And one of the things as well that, just to go on your point, Colin, I would have loved to see a little bit more on his championship run and his time with Hulk Hogan and the Mega Powers as well. So I think that's something they could have added. Now, Mark, you said you wanted to have something, you had something to say as well.
Yeah, I was also agreeing with you too, Lex. You know what? He won the WWF Championship back then, but how many times has he won it, actually? I just wanted to know. They never really got to say how many times he ever had a title run. Maybe lost track. Of course, there were some parts to that were kind of unnecessary, like the Baywatch episode with him and Hulk Hogan. And then, of course, the diss track that he made on Hulk Hogan. I mean, with Bubba the Love Sponge. I mean, that's a character that's come on, I can't even take seriously on that episode too. You're right. The only thing that I was very interested was when Ricky the Dragon Steamboat said about him and his match, 160 steps. He still remember all those steps, step by step, what they were doing. I mean, wow. He all memorized all those steps. He can actually make a performance really great out there. Even if it's a crappy match, he can make it look great out there. But the Miss Elizabeth thing, I think we've heard it so many times from back then. Of course, Dark Side of the Ring, he was on that episode with that. And, it halfway of the episode, now the low points are starting to come on to Randy. Then, okay, now we see the side of Randy that we have finally, now we need to know I guess we need to know. But it's pretty tragic. But yeah, there's nothing much you can say. But you're like, yeah, it kind of is like a bit of a sell job or something like that when it comes to these biographies that WWE is putting out on him.
Ringside Heat on News Talk Sauga 960 AM. Sitting here with the Ring Crew talking about the Macho Man biography. Chico, you got something to say.
Ooh, yeah, brother, dig it. I liked it for the most part, but just like Johnny said, I think that I wasn't scandalized by it either on first viewing. It's really only when John and others started pointing out the feedback that was coming back from it. I hadn't thought much of it. I just thought it was kind of I wasn't as wowed by it as much as Piper and Stone Cold because I had learned some new things there. But just like John said, nothing too new. But some people out there were saying, and I kind of see it now, it was like two entirely different shows. First half was more of a celebratory thing about his career, and then you could just see that when it turned to the second hour of the 2-hour documentary, then it became to some a hatchet job, a character assassination piece. Maybe not all the way, because I love the part at the end, like Colin said, where he found peace, married his high school sweetheart. That was really cool. Let's see. And I know John might have something to say about that comedian who inserted some bits in there. But so there were parts I liked about it. Again, nothing too new. I just, like a lot of people have been saying, maybe dwelling on the Elizabeth and Gorgeous George portions of his life and his dark sides of it. Maybe it was disproportionately lengthy. And I really didn't like Bubba the Love Sponge's inclusion in it at all.
John.
Yeah, I can't remember the guy's name, but what he said about Macho Man's death and that, I just thought that was tacky. It was just unnecessary. It just didn't need it. And yeah, the Bubba the Love Sponge thing was like I think he got more talking time than Randy's own brother. And Colin, I like what you said about the idea of focusing on redemption. I'd seen a documentary one time, and I don't remember where it was, but there was a young girl who got to know him as he was retired and had gone gray. And she didn't really know him as the Macho Man. And it told this lovely story of him just being this mentor to this young person. And like that story's out there. It would have been nice to have had moments like that. So, you could pull stuff out of anybody's closet. There's skeletons everywhere. And it would have been nice to have left it on a note. And I like that idea that this was a human being who was capable of really good things.
I also want to point out too, Lex, like the amount of guests that we're talking about Macho. I think they left out one more guest out there, and I don't know if you guys ever saw it, but when he was with WCW, he did get to work with DDP. He was working with DDP, and they were working on the match where him and DDP were going for the WCW championship, and then there were words at the back. He says, "I want to go out with the diamond cutter." They probably missed that out too. So
yeah, that would have been great, Mark. I agree. There were just so many other positives that they could have mixed in, because there were a lot of positives too. So great contributor to the industry.
But yeah, exactly. So taking everything that you guys have said so far and just aggregating it, and I've seen it myself. As a journalist, personally, I didn't think it was the hatchet job that I initially thought it was going to be based on the reviews. At the same time, no, you guys are right. There are a lot of things they leaned into that they could have maybe not leaned into a little bit more in on the reviews. At the same time, no, you guys are right. There are a lot of things they leaned into that they could have maybe not leaned into a little bit more in favor of a little bit more positivity, especially near the end of the documentary, near the end of his life and everything. And maybe that's something that maybe we could see improve upon, biography and A&E improve upon as the next episodes come up. And unfortunately, we have to leave the conversation there. Time is not our friend, but thank you, Colin, Mark, John, and Chico for sitting and chatting with me here on the show.
Ooh, yeah, dig it. You guys are the cream of the crop.
Good pleasure. Of course.
What?
Of course.
There we go, Chico and his voices. And you'll hear more of his voices and our voices next week when you tune in next week. next Saturday at 9 p.m. for more Ringside Heat here on News Talk Sauga 960. My name is Lex Tan. Get in touch with us at ringside_heat on Twitter, on Instagram, on Snapchat, and on TikTok, and facebook.com/ringside heat. Thank you for tuning in. We'll talk again soon.
I don't remember that Macho Man doc.
I was just thinking the same thing. I'm like, man, I don't really remember what I was talking about.
But I mean,
you know.
it's sad because, and maybe this is just like the whole trope around Macho Man. It doesn't sound surprising.
No, if I
Because-
watched again, I'm sure it would all come flooding back because
Well, there's a history of like,
I find it funny though. Like
Yeah.
I listen to myself and I'm like, I'm just getting close to an opinion and I won't trigger it. I feel like I was still really gun shy
yeah.
about actually making a statement. You know,
You
instead
also
of-
you also were cut off there a little bit by Mark. It just
Yeah,
there was a
maybe,
slight
yeah.
cutoff, which again we do on a regular basis with everybody. Like, just when you're about to get into a zone and then boom, the cut.
I know. I know.
But yeah, I don't, because it's funny, like and on our last episode of this, you spoke about how like you can't believe how like A&E was a talking point over the week, and I'm telling myself, I feel like these were really mainstream at the time, regardless if the weeks in wrestling were good.
Yeah, like put myself back, it was only a few years ago, but it was enough time to remember they were big deals, right? Like, because they were new, right? Like that hadn't happened
They were new.
On network television, whatever that is, Kate, what don't even what you call that, linear television,
Something like that.
something like that. WWE hadn't had a presence because the Fox deal, I don't think had happened yet.
It did. The Fox deal happened.
Had the Fox deal happened? Okay.
Because Kofi lost
because
his world
Kofi, of
title
course.
in that
Yeah,
first
I
SmackDown.
couldn't remember.
Yeah,
Yes,
on
I
Fox.
lose all that stuff gets foggy. But regardless, that A&E thing was big. I remember that, and
Yeah.
those that was appointment television for me.
It felt. I mean, God, it's weird to say this. It felt must see TV. for
It
some
kind of
reason.
was, man, because it
This
was
conversation was with everybody. Everybody was buzzing.
It was buzzing because it's like, well, how are they going to treat this? Because that hadn't been done. Like, even if even with Fox, all that, but that hadn't been done. How are they going to treat these stories,
and
right?
when WWE did like their own stuff, like WWF Confidential or something like that, there's still like
Sure, any of the
WWE
network
spin.
stuff always is going to have a bit of a
Yeah.
bias. So you're just kind of like, well, is this going to be like, what's the deal here? And yeah, I don't know. It was a big deal. I guess it was a bigger deal than
You realize, yeah.
I realized at the time.
And again, it's Macho Man. There's always a history of WWE and Macho Man, and it's always very cloudy, unfortunately. And I remember a lot of people not being happy with Macho Man's induction happening after he passed, and then that nasty rumor that went around, and it sucks that like there's such a deep.
Well, we haven't even gotten
kind
to
of-
the episodes where we talk about Dark Side of the Ring, I don't think, because
they were around, but I don't. Yeah,
they were, but I don't think they'd been on our radar. If they were around, they weren't on our radar.
That, or I think maybe we're just too sensitive to talk about it because
Maybe.
probably something along those lines. But no, that was another fun
It
episode.
was a good episode. Yeah, it was good. You
Getting
can
to
really
the-
see us kind of getting comfortable, and that
getting
was
into
only
the group,
second
getting
episode
into the
in. We're
groove
getting
of
in the group.
things for sure. So
I
next week,
presume you come back on the next one, and
I have to presume so as well. But next week, so today is Thursday, so I'm gonna aim for Tuesdays and Thursdays to upload so basically 2 episodes a week if it's possible. Not necessarily maybe John and I all the time, but obviously I'm biased. I would love that. But if depending on what
Don't
happens
see why not.
next week it's episode 3, the Ring Crew Takeover. So that's our first full episode with everybody. If I'm
with
reading
no
this right.
interview. Oh, I definitely
No
want to be on
interview.
that one. Okay, yeah.
And then episode 4, Zombies, with Toronto-based actor Vincent Salvador, talking about his experiences with wrestling. So those are our next 2 episodes on the radar. So again, we hope you guys like this. Leave a comment if you have anything to say about all these old episodes as well. Let us know. whatever floats your boat. For John Dawson, I am Jose Taboada. You can follow John at John Dawson Music on social media. You can follow me on social media at Taboada93. We love you guys. Thank you guys for putting up with us for the last hour, and we'll catch you guys next week. See ya.